All right, so with our third video, we're going to be looking at the SAM versus HPA pathway. So when looking at this, our HPA pathway is going to be our hypothalamus pituitary adrenal pathway, and our SAM pathway is going to be our sympathetic adrenal medullary pathway. So when looking at these, we end up running into a different problem because when we have a perception of threat by the hypothalamus, we end up pushing our stress response into the HPA axis by signaling the secretion of cortisol via the adrenal cortex. So we end up with challenges based on this because of the basal physiology, the SAM pathway, and the oxidation of fatty acids with our action of glucagon and epinephrine. So we can see that our HPA axis ends up getting tripped sometimes when we see a threat. So if we're constantly in a stage of threat, this is not going to be good. And we're going to end up seeing a cortisol release into the bloodstream. So when we have increased cortisol, this releases through the release, we're going to end up seeing ruminating thoughts, and it can lead to anxiety and depression. So just interesting to look at. Then when we have a dysregulation of insulin, it ends up releasing to the release of cortisol. And we can see that right here, what I'm drawing is that usually when we have this signaling, it's going to be signaling that we're in a dangerous situation. But if we're not in a dangerous situation and we feel like we are, it's often due to cortisol. So which situation there and safe. But just interesting to look at that we can often trip this access through eating high sugary foods, oftentimes with the civil diffusion of fructose, and this release of cortisol over time can be chronic. And we can see that this leads to long-term anxiety and depression. But it's interesting to look at, and we will continue to talk about cortisol through these other videos. But just to get a head start on cortisol and learn a little bit more.